When this 93-year-old man started working at a local supermarket, he caused a lot of confusion. And the man who was confused the most was the supermarket's manager. He was doubtful from the start and paid close attention to the old-timer. The old man wasn't given a fair chance, which inevitably led to him being fired. But when the manager found out who the old man was, he turned pale instantly. Before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The supermarket manager was a tough man with high standards. His top priority was to run this store as smoothly as possible, and he knew a business was only as good as its weakest link. The man had worked his way up from being a store clerk and knew just how lazy they could be. So when he heard that corporate was sending over a 93-year-old employee to strengthen his ranks, he was understandably frustrated. The man looked frail and moved around the store at a slow pace. How is this man ever going to keep up with the demanding tempo of a day-to-day shift? Matt said as he eyeballed the man. And pretty soon, all the manager's worst fears came true. The old man named Charles was beyond slow. Even though he worked as fast as he could, restocking items still took him 4 times as long as the other employees. And then there were the minor accidents that kept popping up whenever he was around. So all in all, it didn't take very long before Charles was on the manager's radar. Matt watched the old-timer like a hawk, and the desire to fire him grew with every small mistake Charles made. A dropped carton of milk or filling items in the wrong space. Matt kept a mental note on all the man's mistakes. This just didn't work in his system. The final straw was reached when Charles tipped over a wine rack filled with the store's most expensive bottles. That man asked to go. The thunderous crash could be heard in the whole store, and Matt quickly hurried to the scene. Charles stood in the middle of the aisle, visibly shaken from the accident. A small crowd of customers gathered around, but Matt didn't care about that. In the presence of the customers and his fellow staff members, the manager fired the old man on the spot, making him hand over his apron and keys. The store fell silent as Charles handed over his things, and the firing process was concluded. Matt placed his hand on the old man's shoulder and escorted him out of the store. When he returned to the store, the customers and employees stared at him. They obviously didn't like that call, but Matt was glad he had done it. After that, he expected never to see Charles again, but he was mistaken because halfway through the following day, Charles appeared in the store again. But this time, as a customer, the manager hesitated for a moment and then shrugged. He couldn't fault him for that. People needed to buy groceries after all. Still, Matt kept an eye on him, and it was good he did because the old man didn't buy anything. He just lingered around for a long time, confusing the young manager. And Charles's disruption didn't stop there because he walked into the store daily after that first initial visit. The old man didn't bother any of the customers or keep the employees off their jobs, but the visit still confused Matt. It all seemed innocent, but that changed when something very weird happened. About a week later, Matt checked the store's camera footage when he got home and was in complete shock. It was his usual routine to check the store's cameras at home. It was just a final check before he could conclude his workday. But this time, it was different. He saw some movement, and when he looked closely, his eyes grew wide. That can't be. What is he doing there? Matt exclaimed in surprise and confusion. He had just closed the store. But now he looked at Charles wandering around inside. Matt shook the initial surprise from his body and looked at the old man in his store. It looked like the man was working, holding a clipper and a pen. As he navigated the aisles, the manager's mind was racing. How did this guy get in? Does he still have a spare set of keys? The situation angered Matt. What the hell is he doing? His face twitched as he yelled at the screen. In a surge of anger, the manager slammed his laptop shut. This situation was getting out of hand. He had to get to the store quickly and confront this old fool before he could get away. Matt rushed to his car and drove over. When Matt arrived at the store, he saw Charles still there, calmly browsing the aisles, just like on the camera footage. The fact that the man had somehow entered the locked store continued to irritate him. Had Matt made a mistake counting the keys Charles returned, or had he forgotten to count them at all? He forced himself to calm down before exiting his car. This wasn't the time for rage. He approached Charles and told him to leave. To his surprise, Charles complied without protest, handing over his keys outside. Relieved, Matt thought the ordeal was over. But the following day, the same thing happened. After arriving home, Matt checked the cameras and was stunned. Charles was back inside the store. Convinced it was time for serious action, he called the police, reporting an intruder inside the store. This time, Matt arrived with backup. As they entered the store, the officers approached Charles and escorted him out without issue. Though Charles appeared harmless, they took him to the station for questioning. Matt was relieved to see Charles in the hands of the police. Hopefully, the experience would be enough to deter him for good. But as Charles was being led to the patrol car, he turned and said something that made Matt pause. "Wait until you find out who I am." The remark unsettled Matt, echoing in his head long after the car drove away. Who was this man really? The only way to find out was to go to the station himself. As he arrived at the station, Matt asked to see the officers who had helped him. Matt watched as the officer entered, and to his astonishment, Charles smiled, shook the officer's hand, and walked out of the room like nothing had happened. Nothing about this made sense. Snapped back to reality by the officer calling his name, Matt approached him, hoping for clarity, but the officer merely stated that everything checked out and no charges could be filed. Matt's confusion turned into frustration. Then Charles called to him calmly. He invited Matt to sit and talk. The old man drew a breath and began speaking calmly. He acknowledged Matt's confusion, but insisted he hadn't done anything wrong and had every right to be at the store after hours. Matt tried to remain composed, but he couldn't agree. An ex-employee shouldn't possess extra keys or wander through a closed store. The situation felt absurd, and his frustration boiled over. He snapped that firing Charles had been the right decision, that he was too old and unfit for the job. He even questioned why corporate had sent him in the first place. But Charles suddenly interrupted, his tone no longer gentle. Young man, it wasn't corporate who sent me. I sent myself. I am corporate. The statement hit Matt like a wave. He didn't understand. Stunned, Matt was at a loss for words. Charles leaned in, finally revealing the truth. He was the original owner and founder of the supermarket chain. The weight of that sentence sank in quickly. This wasn't just a strange old man. He was the company's creator. Questions raced through Matt's mind. Why had the founder worked as a clerk? Why had he returned after hours? Why not simply reach out? Before he could speak, Charles explained that he had received numerous complaints about Matt's leadership rather than rely solely on reports. He decided to experience it firsthand by working in Matt's store. I wanted to see for myself, Charles said, and after watching how you treat others, I must admit I'm disappointed. Matt sat in stunned silence, trembling as the truth set in. Charles's presence had never been random. It had been a test, and Matt had failed. He asked, voice shaking, what the complaints had been. Charles didn't hesitate. He said nearly every employee surveyed in the past year reported disliking their job under Matt. But it wasn't just statistics, it was personal letters. The first came from Becky in the bakery. She wrote about working unpaid overtime, being denied breaks, and how Matt refused to let her leave early for her daughter's dance recital. When she pushed back, Matt retaliated by cutting her pay. That was when she contacted Charles directly. Then came the story that broke Matt completely. Charles mentioned a boy named Tim Garver. At the mention of the name, Matt's heart dropped. He remembered. Charles explained that Tim, just 15 years old, had accidentally dropped a milk carton. In front of a full store, Matt had berated and humiliated him. The boy later called corporate, sobbing, saying he had never felt so demoralized. Charles's voice hardened. That was the moment I knew I had to step in myself. The words hit hard. Matt sat frozen, then tears welled in his eyes. Charles seemed to pause. Matt noticed a shift in his expression. Was there hope? You say you can change? All right, I may have an idea, Charles replied thoughtfully. He gestured for Matt to sit. There was a way for him to stay with the company, but under one strict condition, he'd have to prove he could be a better employee, a true team player. Matt agreed instantly. But it won't be as a manager, Charles added. Matt hesitated, visibly confused. Finally, Matt nodded. He accepted the offer, vowing not to waste it. Charles's face softened. 1 month later, Charles entered the store again. Everything felt different. The air was calmer. No complaints had reached headquarters recently, but Charles wanted to see the truth for himself. The bell above the door rang, and Becky greeted him with a warm smile. Her demeanor stood in sharp contrast to the tense atmosphere from before. Charles shook Becky's hand, pleased to see her doing well. Charles hadn't come for small talk. He was there for answers, real ones. He looked Becky in the eye and asked directly, "How is Matt doing? Has he adjusted? Any trouble?" His tone was sharp, leaving no room for evasion. Becky immediately understood the purpose of the visit. She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. At first it was rough, she admitted. Starting from the bottom, it hit Matt hard. Charles frowned, visibly disappointed, but Becky quickly added, then something changed. She described a slow but noticeable shift. At first, Matt pushed back, resisting the new role, but eventually something clicked. He stopped complaining and began focusing on the work itself. From that point, Matt showed up with genuine effort. His energy changed, and the way he interacted with coworkers improved. While not perfect, his progress was undeniable. Charles listened carefully, his expression softening. In the following months, Becky sent regular reports to Charles. They began detailed, tracking small improvements. Over time, they grew shorter, not because problems reappeared, but because they had stopped. There was less to report. Matt was no longer a disruptive presence. He was becoming dependable. Coworkers appreciated his support, and slowly respect turned into camaraderie. One evening, Becky called Matt into the office as he wrapped up his shift. Curious, he stepped inside and froze. Sitting at Becky's desk was Charles. The air shifted instantly. Charles rose and offered a firm handshake. With a proud smile, he acknowledged Matt's hard work, recognizing the change he had achieved. Then came the moment Matt never expected. Charles announced his promotion. Matt would return as manager, this time alongside Becky as co-manager. It was more than a reward. It was a new beginning.